in touch. Why staying in touch for this first BABN live session? Why did you choose it?
I mean, it's very dear to my heart. And I think even if you're relatively introverted, we will all have missed seeing people in some ways over the last 12 years. And for me, people are, my lifeblood. It's where I get my energy, my ideas. I miss people hugely. So that's just from a personal perspective. I was missing people, right? And I wanted to think, what were the many ways that I could manage to get through this few months and not lose touch. And then I started thinking about it from a business perspective, because some on the call will know there was quite a bit of research done. Mark Granovetter in the 70s, I think, Stanford, doing his weak ties research. And all that showed was we get opportunities through people, but typically not the ones we know best of all. So it's through those weak ties. And that's because most of the strong ties, our friends, our family, the people we live with, see every day, tend to know the same people and things we know. So if you really want to supercharge things, you need to keep in touch with a much wider group of people. And that is easier if you're continually bumping into them in corridors, at events, in a connected ecosystem. There are a few on the call here, like Bristol, Exeter, Bath, Glasgow, and so on. Much more difficult in a pandemic year. So keeping in touch was on my mind. And the other aspect, again, is back to the personal, Nassos, just thinking, what else does keeping in touch mean? And for me, it means supporting other people, helping them along their way, and from time to time, keeping them posted with what you're up to so that they're in the best position possible to help you. So all of that combined made me think, if we're going to double down on something, let's talk about keeping in touch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's top of mind for everyone. It definitely is for me at the moment. I've got probably like countless unanswered WhatsApp messages, emails lingering in the inbox, DMs on Twitter, people who've called me, I haven't managed to call back. It just all feels like very disjointed at the moment, I think, in terms of sort of communication. And I feel like I'm putting quite a bit of effort into maintaining all these different various connections, but I still don't feel like I'm doing a very good job at it. I know that's like a major concern for people at the best of times, is how much effort it is, or how much effort it feels like it is to maintain connections. Can you just speak to that a little bit in terms of the effort required to do a half decent job of this?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Nassos, I've developed a series of habits and techniques, and I'm on a journey myself with it. So as I see some of the names on the list, I'm thinking to myself, have I replied to that email from Drew Ellis, founder of Like Minds and his weekly breakfast club? I hope I have. But it also makes me think, what does it mean to keep in touch with people? And I think that one aspect of that is a catch up, a check-in, a chance to exchange often in real time what two people or more are up to. And I just thought it might be useful briefly to just broaden the lens on that, to say, what does it really mean to keep in touch? I was lucky enough to have a call with Sahar on the call yesterday, but actually relatively rare to get that quality time. So what else can keeping in touch mean? And I'd encourage anyone, as I'm talking about this, to begin to think about the people that they've lost touch with and that they really miss or would like to see, because keeping in touch can be as simple as asking a nice open question. What's keeping you busy at the moment? What are some of your plans for the year? But it can also be sharing updates from your life, perhaps in email, but also on social networks and Twitter and so on and so forth. So I think just thinking about that broad concept of keeping in touch and really, really opening that up. In terms of the overwhelm, I totally get you. And I think that we've all had to become a bit more loving, if I can use such a word, in a business conversation, a bit more understanding. And I've ended up making it absolutely clear to a lot of people when I communicate to them that I don't expect a reply, that I know they might not have time to come back to me. It was just FYI. So what I've started to do is develop a range of techniques, if you like, for keeping in touch, and we can dig into those.
Yeah, absolutely. The no need to reply, just for everyone on the call, is probably one of the best little hacks Ollie has taught me that I've started applying, just by throwing that into the front of an email. the actual responses that I've got have massively increased, just because I think people.
Well, hang on. There's an ironic twist there, isn't there? Because there is actually being used to get a better response rate. But I think if you use it if you use it with sort of love and compassion, it can also be taken literally, right? There really is no need to reply.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the funnel of options, I mentioned email. So there's all these different ways of keeping in touch with people. Obviously, some of those are more at hand than others at the moment, especially given the fact that in-person is sort of off the table in most situations. How are you thinking about your various different funnels of options that you've got available to you, from Twitter to email to WhatsApp to phone calls? What does the blend look like for you at the moment?
As I answer that, Nassos, I just think for anyone tuning in, just think about those concentric circles of the dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people that you know, and think, how are you currently keeping in touch with them? And for some, that might be one-to-ones, it might be small groups, but how about a bit more broadly? What is your technique for keeping in touch? And so for me, I think of it, and here are some techniques that you might want to build on or add to, or say, well, do you know what, that doesn't quite work for me. My number one technique, and I know there might be some sort of wry nods as I share these, because I do share it with the people in my broad network. I notice what someone is up to. It's as simple as that. I saw that you're interviewing the author of Donut Economics. I saw that you just changed job. Congratulations. I noticed your company doing particularly interesting things. I saw you just left your job and I wanted to wish you well. In other words, Nassos, I'm not there saying, should we have a virtual coffee? All I'm doing is noticing stuff, you know? So that's my number one technique, notice things. The second thing I try to do is I offer a useful piece of information. We've got someone on the call, I shan't say who, whose background is in intelligence, in the intelligence world. Well, they are a particularly brilliant person at picking up on a clue and offering it to someone. They've put on some shades and stuck up a newspaper, just in case you haven't seen that. Offer a useful nugget of information, bearing in mind the journey you're on. I thought you might be interested in this. And there are lots of habits you can start to develop around that. So that's my second technique. Other than just noticing something they're doing, I offer a useful nugget of information. The third thing I do is I offer to help in some small way, often making an introduction. Would it be useful for you to meet this person? Or here's another nugget of information or piece of help I could give you with that if you need it. The next thing I do is, particularly if I'm keeping in touch across a broader network, if I'm working on something, I ask for their specific feedback or advice on a specific topic. Deeper leveling of engagement requires more response. That's another level. And then the final category is I suggest a brief catch up if and when they have time. In other words, ahead of me, above all of that, I've got all of these different interventions, interactions, none of which involve that one-to-one time. So that will sort of 10x the number of people I'm able to keep in touch with in a given week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many great options in there. And I think so often we're just constrained to thinking that maintaining a connection has to be in a certain way. And there are just such a whole range of options that you can use, some more time intensive, some less time intensive, depending on what you're looking to do. I know you're doing a lot of walking and talking at the moment, Ollie. Can you speak to that a little bit? How are phone calls showing up in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I just think for so many people, what happened last year, and I'm not in any way trying to generalize, but what I saw happening was people getting, in their own words, zoomed out, exhausted, and frankly, a little bit bored or done with lots of ways of communicating. So I've been trying to shake it up. So Kim already today has noticed one of my favorite techniques. I'm coming back to walking in a second, which is to become a host, to host gatherings yourself. Doesn't have to be huge, could just be a few people. I've just noticed that getting away from my screen, doing a call as a walk, particularly if the other person buys into that. Let's do it as a walk together. It doesn't burn. That's particularly acceptable if the other person's asking for your time and you're doing the walk. But for me, helps my brain to work. I'm fascinated by the emergence of Clubhouse, an audio-only drop-in app, because it takes us away from the visual and allows us potentially to do other things while we're dropping in and out of those serendipitous conversations. So yeah, I mean, my physical, my mental health, of course, they're all linked. So for me to move and connect at the same time is hugely unleashing in terms of creativity and ideas. And I'm used to it in the physical world, but I find it a bit tougher in lockdown.
And in terms of spontaneity, how are you how are you thinking about making offers to people? I know you had an impromptu sort of cup of tea last Friday, or the Friday before, was it? But how are you thinking about the offers that you're making to people in your network, in perhaps a slightly more impromptu fashion than people would be normally, when everybody's scheduled back to back and they've got their entire calendar blocked out for the day? Obviously, that's not really the case for everyone at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we just have to accept that for all of us, going through this is sometimes a bit like a train journey. Sometimes you're in the tunnel, and then momentarily, for a few minutes, even days, you might emerge and it's countryside and blue skies all around. So I think understanding that a lot of it is, happy coincidence, serendipity, that it just so happens I could catch Ben Brabin or Peter Giblin or Suki Fuller at the right moment for that catch up. So yeah, I mean, my favorite call of last week happened to be, I sent a WhatsApp message which contained a Zoom link to say I'm flicking on the kettle on the very off chance you can join me. To be perfectly honest, I only sent it to 4 or 5 people, and 2 of them popped onto my screen. And I know that might sound a little random, but I've struggled to get time with those 2 individuals for weeks in previous months, even in lockdown sometimes. So occasionally throwing that impromptu curveball into the mix might just really help. And who knows, and by the way, Clubhouse as an example is really throwing that into the mix. You're seeing a lot of people join Lunch Club, a new app invested in by Lightspeed Ventures and others, which is a bit like speed dating in a business context where you're matched up. And I think it's something you've had a go at Nassos. But just what it's doing there is not so much driving new business, but it's sparking your brain in new ways.
Yeah, definitely would recommend Lunch Club to anyone on here who's looking to just connect to new people, just for a little bit of freshness and something a little bit different. You can pick as many meetings as you want, sign up, and yeah, you basically just get a calendar appointment scheduled, meet someone and have a chat. I've actually had a few people who ended up being podcast interviewees, coming off of connections on Lunch Club. Haven't been doing it as much recently, but it certainly has been over the course of lockdown a feature. Final question on you, just before we open it up to Q&A. One of the core ideas that you speak a lot about, and you mentioned in the course, is that one of the main things we should be thinking about when staying in touch with people is thinking about what's coming next.
Yeah.
So very often our conversations just tend to be focused on the past and the present. But in order to be open to opportunities, figure out whether you can actually help someone, make a connection, give them a useful piece of information, it's really good to know what they are thinking of doing next. And naturally, those types of thoughts get shared in conversations, usually in person over a coffee or a dinner or a drink maybe. It feels like the opportunity for those types of conversations may have dried up a little bit. I'm just curious as to your thoughts on that, and how are you kind of creating space for those types of conversations?
Yeah, so this is something I'm absolutely fascinated by. Wayne Gretzky, the ice hockey player, had that wonderful phrase, didn't he, which was about his success, excuse me, saying that he used to skate to where the puck was going. And I think that if you want to unlock meaningful collaborations, you have to skate to where the other person is going. And how do you discover that? Through conversation. And particularly within conversation, through great questions. So I'd say trying to make, if you want to if you want to shake your life up over the next few days and weeks, try asking more interesting questions, right? Dr. Christian Bush wrote a brilliant book on this called The Serendipity Mindset, released last year. And I really do encourage you to just revisit the questions you're asking your network, your inner circle, your friends, your wider circle, your contacts. Asking them open questions, particularly about the future, can unleash some fascinating things. How about asking them, what are some of the things you'd like to get cracking on after this lockdown ends? Who are some of the people that you'd like to meet to help you on your way over these next few months? Maybe we could share that in the chat. I see one of the great curators I've met in my life, Peter Giblin, on the call. Ditto Mike Dixon, the curator of Creating the Future event with Weatherby's. They don't need, or many of you don't need reminding about the power of talking about the future. What I notice is typically on social networks, we talk about what we're doing today and what we've done previously. And sometimes just taking that risk of putting it out there. I would love to visit Japan. I would love to learn more about education technology in Africa. Taking a risk, putting ideas out there attracts helpfulness and conversation. So for me, that can often be found in the corridors and coffee rooms around events. And we have to work a little bit harder, I think, in virtual environments to create those spaces. So one idea might be dare to have a meeting without an agenda. Carve out that space to what I used to call mucking about in advance of the formal meeting start, and maybe even at the end as well. Create the space to talk about where people want to go, and it will make it so much more easy to keep in touch, particularly if you keep a record of the people and places that people mention along the way.
Some really useful insights there, Ollie. Let's dive into the Q&A portion then. So if anyone's got a burning question that they've been waiting to ask for the last few minutes, please jump in now, unmute yourself and fire away.
By the way, sorry, Nasser, very happy to have some questions, but it might also be your observations, how you keep in touch, techniques you use, things that you come up against a brick wall on. So I welcome all conversation on this. And Nasser, I know you're going to marshal us through it, but great reference there of Andy Lapata, a brilliant thinker on strategic connection.
Absolutely. So whoever wants to dive in first, please just unmute yourself and fire away. And then
there's a hand up facility, isn't there, as well? I can see Christine up there. Christine Essen. But Nassos, you chair us through it. Carry on.
There is indeed, yeah. So if you just click on the participants icon at the bottom, you'll be able to see that there's a hand up feature that you can just raise your hand. So I can bring you in if everybody wants to sort of say multiple things at once. Easier to manage the conversation that way. So yeah, anyone who wants to jump in, please do.
Well, I jump in, Nassau, sorry. Hi there, I'm Christine Essen from Scottish Business Network. We're a global organisation helping diaspora connect with the Scottish-based entrepreneurs. Fantastic presentation or conversation as always, Ollie and Assos. Thank you for that. Just one point. I was on a call last week with Ben Siegel, who's doing some research work, and I'm just going to check this out, into the challenges we're not talking about with high growth entrepreneurs. And problem number one came up about frozen networks. And they have interviewed a number of high growth entrepreneurs over the last 9 months. And problem number one is, I haven't met anyone new in a year. People are using their pre-existing networks but can't find new people. Online events not used for forging new connections. And then the comment was, well, the lack of new connections will make it difficult to start new deals and bring new people into the ecosystem. Now, for me, that's down to the individual not reaching out rather than the ecosystems. But I found that really challenging, that the point from high growth entrepreneurs is we're stagnating because our networks are frozen. Thoughts around that, Ollie?
Well, I think it's the associated challenges that come with that, isn't it? Whether it's cutting off new opportunities, but also it's the lifeblood of new ideas, that if we're not careful, we close those avenues down. So, I mean, just joining dots, Sahar led the task force for the Scale Up Institute, and I know we'll have some thoughts on that. For example, Ben Braben, of course, in a previous life led Level 39, connecting some of the country's best fintechs with the global ecosystem. So please do bang in other ideas into the chat on this. All I would say on this is it may be possible to cryogenically freeze a part of your network if there is such goodwill there that it can just be revisited, and people will be very personal about that view, right? I think the thing that's particularly concerning to me, Christine, is people who haven't got the network, who were frozen out in the first place. Maybe they're just starting on their career journey. Perhaps they've changed industry or sector and they haven't built up those powerful networks. Think of Gideon Hoffman on the call, doing some amazing campaigning with some of the country's leading charities, but had a life in Her Majesty's Treasury. Now, the ability to find connectors like Gideon to cross different worlds is essential during this. And I just worry that we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater if we stop connecting, because it dries up so much creativity and connection. Let's have other questions and observations. I can see Kim's hand up, but Nassos, you jump in and grip this for me.
Kim, go for it, yeah.
Thank you. No, I just want to share, so because like all of us, my career kind of totally changed when the pandemic came. And so I'm a communication trainer. So I usually help people, you know, show up and stuff. And by the way, Ollie, I met you at a Christmas party in London.
I remember it.
I was in Dubai and planning to move to London. And I had just been here 8 months when the pandemic hit. So I'm having a very special experience and the joy of exploring the city, I will say. But anyway, what I've done is I've started hosting a bi-weekly Zoominar myself, where we explore communication and business topics. That is very interactive and dialogue. And although it's a lot of work, it means that I have a constant influx of regulars that come back and newcomers, and I have a way to engage with people. And then like today, I thought, I've met you once, I'm going to show up, and I'm sure I'll meet somebody here who maybe want to come to my session. So I find that the cross-pollination back and forth is actually very similar. And I mean, the nature itself, it's 2 senses and not 5 senses. The nature is different, but my behavior, like showing up and inviting people and being curious and asking questions. And again, of course, maybe not for everybody, that's a concept that would work, but with the nature of my business, it really works. And so just showing up with consistency. And then also I'm realizing, you know, I can't only do my own thing. I also need to visit some other forums and connections and places, also both to use myself as instrument to learn and also to cross-pollinate. And so I hear you, Ollie, about the people who are starting out. And I think it takes an extra effort to put your camera on, and it's not that exciting, and you don't get the bear and all of that. But it's still happening.
I think it is, and let's bring in other voices. I feel I want to say, based on what you've just said, Kim, it's lovely to connect with you again. The type of person that's been on my mind a lot is the person that doesn't naturally ask for help, doesn't naturally ask for advice, and can, to all intents and purposes, hunker down when they're going through something tough. And I think that the greatest part of building an effective network is actually helping other people, right? And I think that becomes very self-actualizing, self-fulfilling, because it makes you feel great. Because if you get a reputation for being helpful, it's much easier to be helped by other people. So others might have takes on this, but it just occurs to me, are there people who have gone silent within our networks that really we ought to be checking in on? And I'm sure that's been on your mind as well. And what are some useful techniques for that? Because we all know that sometimes the "are you okay" doesn't quite get enough of the right honest answer. And it can be tough to know how to support people if we're not seeing them. I can see Sahar's hand up, and others might want to join in. Now, Sahar, we'll just get you off mute there.
Something you said, which was really interesting, was that for proper networking, you've got to go outside your own, I forgot what the word was you used, but it's just kind of, it's outside your network is where the real connection happens, and to really expand. And I kind of find this is just limiting us very much to people we know and we're comfortable enough emailing. And so there's, you know, the serendipity doesn't happen as much. And I can imagine for someone like me, who's, you know, fairly long in the tooth of this business, I find I'm struggling with it, let alone other people who would be a bit more shy. I think it would just be impossible to go outside your immediate network. And we're sort of almost frozen, I think, as Christine was saying, in the network we've already got and have not expanded it at all.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, especially, so Sahar, how have you been keeping in touch, or have you sort of, you know, hunkered down? What's been your approach?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't been keeping in touch, and you know, as much as, you know, I go to events and I'm kind of invited, but I haven't initiated anything because I see myself as a sort of sociable person, and you know what I mean, kind of flesh meets flesh, and because that's not happening, I feel I'm not connecting. And, you know, I connected with you, but I find that a bit more awkward trying to get a time with someone, trying to get a call. And I just really miss that, just, you know, bumping into people and being in a room full of people, and it happening naturally. So in a way, I think for someone who's so outward for me, you know, that's in a way been a challenge.
No, totally. Well, I'm delighted to say we had a call on my morning walk, and it was that serendipity of just catching someone at the right moment. Now, Ben Braben, you're very good at keeping in touch with people. What are some of the secrets? What would you put onto the call? By the way, founder of Genie Shares, amazing effort getting entrepreneurs to give up a small portion of their company basically to a stranger, but just helping us all think about what it means to have something of value, what it means to be lucky in some ways. Ben.
Well, thank you very much, Ali. I'm going to just, if I may, seize the opportunity to say what I'm trying to do, looking forward, inviting that question to the future. It's time to change capitalism. We've got to be quite sort of root and branch about this. If we really want diversity work, it's got to work not just for opportunity and employment, but for ownership. Yeah. Otherwise, we've got a long-term problem with sort of simply embedding deeper. So thank you for the lucky break of opportunity to mention that. I guess I've always been very shy. And my first business, actually, my first customer was Mike Dixon. And I found, this is back in the year 2001, it was much easier not to meet anybody and simply do everything over the telephone when you're shy. So for me, in some respects, this is back to more familiar territory. Mm-hmm. Because if you're shy, especially if you have a bad memory for names and faces, as I do, there's almost nothing worse than 250 people all kettled together in level 39, constantly trying to remember who people are and not do them the great disservice of not having that sense of context, which I've always hugely admired you for, Ali. Your recall and your sense of people's priorities is so compelling.
Let me ask you a question though, Ben, on this. Your networks from just very briefly, your networks from your military days, have they now frozen over, or are you able to keep in touch? And if so, how? Because it might seem a bit weird saying, oh, all right, Digger, fancy a coffee for old time's sake. I mean, how does it, how do you do it?
Well, I guess, it was the hack I was going to point to is that when you struggle to recall context, one useful tool I have found is to have a prop, which is easier to remember the context of. And so having a hobby horse can be a very helpful networking tool, critically to Christine's point about, and indeed I think Saha's as well, about meeting new people. You can turn up and say, look, I've invented this thing, or I've heard about that thing, or I notice you're doing this thing that I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
that's nice. And so that could be literal. It could be a thing one carries, but it could also be a pet project that became quite memorable, a nice talking point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's to your point about the frozen military network. Of course, you're absolutely right. The military is a very closed network, very dense. It's a high degree of closure, but it's hard to broker in and out of it. And when you leave, the barbed wire fence behind you, the gate closes, you no longer have the security pass that gets you in. You find people in the middle of their lives suddenly utterly isolated. And of course, a very high proportion of people who are homeless have a military background. So of course, I welcome the opportunity to invite everybody to sort of extend an embrace to people with a military background. And there are other networks like that.
Yeah, I was on a call with the chief exec of Heropreneurs this morning. What a nice coincidence that is. It's a small world. Can I ask an international connector, Suki Fuller? Do you mind, Suki? I pick on you when I'm on stage, and you pick on me when you're on stage. What's your top tip for keeping in touch? What's worked for you?
For keeping in touch, I'm like you with serendipity. Usually, if I reach out to somebody and they say, oh, you want to schedule a time, and you've already done like 5 emails back and forth, it's kind of, I usually say, well, what are you doing now? And sometimes it could be just that 5-minute chat. It's like, well, I have a meeting coming up in 15 minutes. It's like, oh, we'll jump on the phone. It's taking us more time to do the email in than it has to just jump on the phone real fast. Jump on the phone, have a quick conversation, and usually it extends to, hey, while we're on the phone, we can look up another time to add in extra time.
Yeah, and it's such a good thought, isn't it? That now everyone knows whether they're free now, right?
Exactly.
It's quite a thought.
I think there's one thing that I love to do when I meet new people. You and I are the same. We never ask for that. Oh, what do you do? I think that's the worst question when you go to networking events. It's like, what do you do? It's like, I can look you up on LinkedIn. I figure that out. It's like, what do you like to do? What do you like to eat? I always find out those little things that are very personal. Like anybody who meets me knows, and if you look at my bio, I love penguins. I got issues, okay? I was probably a penguin in a former life. I love penguins. So, it's a conversational piece. So when I read someone's bio on LinkedIn and I look at it, if there's nothing personal on there, I always ask them, hey, what's that thing that's really quirky about you that you love? What do you like to do? Ben likes to make science projects with his kids. Those are some wicked videos. I'll tell you what, people, you got to check out the videos. Those science projects are to die for.
No, good. Well, look, there you go. Suki Fuller and her penguins. That's the happy feet of the day. This is good. So we've got a few more minutes, haven't we, Nessos, for questions. It could be more broad than keeping in touch. It could be someone, that you. Well, I mean, we're going to cover this in the next session, but that you want to connect with but can't. But any final observations?
Just to jump in very quickly, Ollie. Gideon Hoffman has had his hand up for the last few minutes, so let's bring Gideon in very quickly.
Can you hear me? Three thoughts about lockdown. I am meeting new people through online conferences, but never the speakers, because it's the business development people or the people that don't think they're too busy are the ones that join. And I think it's quite hard to break through that wall of the people that think they're busy, which that's how you and I met at an event. We swapped cards because you were hosting it. So I think that's quite hard. But two positive tips for people. I put half an hour in my diary every day to reach out to my network that I haven't spoken to recently. And I use an app called Up Habit to do that, which I've uploaded my whole address book. I picked 200 people of the 3,000 people in there that I should be checking in from time to time. And each day I put half an hour aside to get through some of the ones today. So over a few months, I should be cultivating all of the people I've bought. I really should hear from these people more.
Yeah, brilliant. Really helpful tools. Thank you, Gideon. I love that. Yeah. And I have a little morning habit. I start every day literally with this pad or one a bit like it, blank sheet of paper. And when I've put down what's coming up on the day, bizarrely, maybe it's just the way my mind works, is names will come to my mind, people I should check in with. And then I'll start to riff around them. So if I was thinking about the Southwest, I might think, actually someone on this morning's call actually from Bath, but how's Alex Butler, head of innovation at Bath University, and how's Wedge, her partner? And weren't they supposed to be having a big epic gathering in Gloucestershire, which must have been cancelled, and that must be a bit of a pain. But thinking about it, Heather McDonald Tate is based in Bristol, and it was her birthday last Friday or the Friday before, and am I absolutely sure I wished her happy birthday? And before you know it, I've got a bit of a spidergram of people I could check in with. So the other habit I use, to your point, Gideon, is when and many of you would have been on the receiving end of this, I apologize, when I see a useful article, I send it to at least one, sometimes two, sometimes three people. And I just say, I saw this and I thought of you. And I just feel if we can start baking in these habits every day, that's another 50 people I've kept in touch with in a week. So for me, that just really helps. So
I completely agree with you, Ollie. I do that all the time. If I see stuff, forward it. It's so simple. It takes seconds, and it's just those little touch points, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Drew. And there's no need to come back, is there, really? Because it could just be, thanks, mate. That's helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And to Kim's point about putting on event, I run the weekly business breakfast, as you kindly pointed out earlier, every Wednesday morning. And it's a sort of build it and they will come. Sometimes, we get 10 people, sometimes we get 40 people, but it's the interaction, as Gideon was saying, between the audience and themselves, not so much about the speaker, because the talks are pre-recorded anyway. That's really good fun. Half an hour of chit chat, 15-minute talk, and then a 10-minute Q&A.
Nice. And if you haven't already, please put that in the chat, Drew, so we can see that link. Others, I can't see other hands up now, so you might be able to. Mike Dixon, you co-founded WizKids. You support an awful lot of charities through your philanthropy, but also helping people be more useful. On my question of how we keep in touch, particularly if we think people in our networks might need help, other than asking if they need help, are there any techniques you use? Now, Mike, come off mute for me.
Sorry, Ollie. It's on a corner really. I think a general interest in people, a desire that they know that you want to help them. I think trust is really important, and curiosity. you're curious about other people, which you do wonderfully well. You know, you're always curious to know what's going on. So I think basically keeping in touch with people, we were talking about it this morning actually with my son, and I was just saying to him, go and think of 6 people you know, and think about how they're feeling today and what's up with their work, or what's up with their personal lives, or, you know, how their health is. And just do it. Just think of 6 people today that you haven't been in touch with for a while, and think about them, and get on the phone.
Yeah, really powerful. Thank you.
You don't have to Zoom.
Indeed, no, falling back in love with the phone, I've got to say. Suki says the phone is a power tool. I agree. I saw a hand pop up, and I think it might have been Susan. Forgive me. Did you pop it down, Susan?
No, it was me. I was just going to say that one of the really nice things of the current conditions is if you live in an urban area, like in London, people have got a lot friendlier. We have got to know our neighbours, we have got to know people in the coffee shop queue, and those very low-key ways of keeping in touch have been a real revelation.
Yeah, I totally agree, and let's not let that fade. Now, I'm going to encourage us to to keep to time. I'm hugely grateful for you joining us, and Nassos, we should say something about the context, because I know we want to cover other topics, and we'd be very grateful for you spreading the word. But Nassos, do you want to say how this can fit together?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple of things, guys. Obviously, hope you enjoyed this one. We're going to be doing a live call again next week, exactly the same time. So Tuesday, 9th of Feb. The topic next week will be long shots. So reaching out to people from outside of your network, perhaps a hero, perhaps that person you've been following on Twitter for ages and building up the courage to speak to. It's a brilliant time to be reaching out to people, because those leading CEOs, those thought leaders, they're not traveling all around the world to speak at conferences. They're spending large chunks of their day at home. So what better time to land into their inbox and perhaps spark a connection, ask them for sort of think about how you can help them, try and spark that introduction. So that's next week. I'll link to that in the chat now, so you can sign up to the event now. And the final thing, of course, is just to note that Ollie's course, Build a Better Network, is available from buildabetter.network, the domain. So go ahead and check that out if it's something of interest. This discussion loosely based on some of the themes in lesson 5 on staying in touch. So I'll just pop those links in the chat now. And any final words, Ollie, to kind of wrap up the event here?
Yeah, I would just say, well, thank you again. I'm delighted to see. Do you know, I hadn't been scrolling fully through my screens because I was trying to be as present as possible. Joe Santanon leads EY's Entrepreneur of the Year. Unbelievably prestigious. So there you were, Joe, listening in. So thank you. That means a huge amount. And Ollie Bond, I'm very grateful for his support on the course, as with you. Nassos Louise Van Haast, there you go, absolute rock star coach for entrepreneurs and many more. So I just kind of feel that I'm open to ideas on how we can use these sorts of sessions to spark connections. You know, frankly, if we were out of lockdown, I'd be saying, should we all have a drink or a coffee the week after next? But if I can be useful to you, please let me know. If you do me just one favor, we'll use the hashtag Build a Better Network. And yes, of course, I'm grateful to Nassos for producing the course and building it. And yes, it's great to get the sales flying in from different countries. But actually, if there's somebody you think ought to do the course but couldn't afford it, then we have a scholarship program open. It's been an absolute honor to dish some of those out over the last couple of weeks. And it would mean a huge amount to me if you would spread the word on those more widely. So thank you for joining us. Let's keep the conversations flying. Nassos, I know, is going to do a wrap-up note with some of these links as well, but hugely appreciated. Let's keep the connections flying, and I might do a short post about this on LinkedIn, and who knows, even within the comments, your next interesting connection might come about. So even in these strange times, let's please keep in touch. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you so much, Nassos, for co-piloting with me. See you soon, one and all. Thank you.